Hi, I'm Eric Prystowsky, and welcome to another segment of EP on EP. This is a special segment for multiple reasons, not the least of which it's with my very good friend and wonderful investigator in our field, Dr. Nassir Marrouche, who is the director of the Heart and Vascular Institute at Tulane. And Nassir, welcome to the program again.
Eric, it was so great honor to be with you.
So this is going to shock you, but we're going to talk about the bricks of Castle. Does that sound like something you're familiar with?
Very well, very well.
So I use this title because I want Nassir first to remind us of some of the key parts of his initial study, Castle, but there have been subsections, which I'll call the bricks of it, that maybe you can educate us on, and then we can talk about the future. So why don't you remind us of the initial results from Castle?
So the Castle F trial, as you know, when AFib ablation came to life in the beginning of 2000 and started being adopted by the community, we asked the question, does AFib ablation improve outcome of mortality and hospitalization in patients with heart failure, reduced heart failure, ejection fraction less than 35%, and AFib? So we randomized patients to AFib ablation. We started randomization in 2007. And we followed the patient for 3 years to ablation versus, as you know, back then, the drug treatment for atrial fibrillation in heart failure population and the guidelines were adopting amiodarone or non-amiodarone rate control. Rate control wasn't clear. So they stuck with a standard of care treatment by the heart failure community.
Okay.
And that was very important. And then a long story short, after 3 years of follow-up on our patients, which took us 4.5 years to finish the trial, we showed that ablation would reduce the composite endpoint of mortality and hospitalization for heart failure by 47%. And then if you look at mortality alone, there was a reduction of 43%. And the same thing applies, similar results for heart failure hospitalization. And that was the major findings from Castle AF.
Yeah, and major they were because they started to shift the paradigm of what we were doing with AFib and ablation. Mm-hmm. But as with all major trials, there are these sub-studies, which I'm going to call bricks in this case. So can you give us maybe some key additional observations that came out before we go on to some of the other trials?
I think the number one observation that thank you for bringing this question, Eric, because I don't know why this doesn't, it's not being brought up a lot recently, but the burden question. Yeah. As you know, the patients in Castle AF, which is unique, all of them have an ICD. A dual chamber or by VICD, defibrillator, from all of them back then, Biotronic devices, allowed us to track the burden after and before.
Right.
And the finding, which is Dr. Johannes Brachmann, my co-pilot in the trial, published the data and presented the data a couple of years ago, where he showed if we reduce burden by 50%, by ablation, not by drugs. If you take the same 50% reduction using drugs, you're not achieving mortality benefits. Only if you ablate this population. So then a new endpoint after ablation was born with this trial, which is the burden endpoint.
Yeah, and I want to go on that because, we knew from decades ago, and then when I would talk to patients, I'm always very careful to tell them that I'm not going to promise you we'll get rid of everything, but we'll get you to a much better quality of life. So is there a true dichotomizing point, or did you notice that it was, in other words, it's unusual in medicine to have an absolute. So was there like a scale in your outcomes, or what did you, when you looked more closely at the data?
That's not the same as a question, the same as the answer. It's not a straightforward answer I can give you here. The reason why 50% we looked at the data in Castle, we looked at obviously a blinded analysis, and we came that with 50% seems to cut point, 40% is even better, 30% is even better.
That's what I mean. So yeah,
50%. The less the burden, the more improvement in outcome you see. So that's important. But the benefit was seen at 50% at least.
The reason I bring that up is people talk about 50%, as if it's a dichotomizing point from your trial. And that's what I wanted you to get out, that if you can get 50% reduction, you're already in a good place. But if you get more,
you get that much better.
You're in a better place. Is that fair?
That's excellent. That's excellent the way you put it together. And please communicate that message you just said. Keep lowering down the burden. Don't stop at 50%. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some other things. I know you were one of the pioneers in this whole MRI issue with atrium. It seemed like, I don't want to say it didn't work out, but what did you learn? Because you learned from data from trials regardless, right? What did you learn about that approach as far as looking at fibrosis?
I think the results, if I want to go backwards, the results of the trials we did and you've been doing over the years and us now, and the ablation trials, is what I learned. Whatever you use, now with the PFA coming to play, radiofrequency, cryo, every trial we did the last 12 years, we reviewed this today in the morning here in this convention, success rate of proximal AFib is 70%, of persistent AFib is 50%, whatever you use.
Exactly.
What DCAF2 told us, as you know, we tried to target the atrial myopathy detected on MRI with an ablation and see if we improve outcome. Two major findings. Number one, I could convince my colleagues to ablate fibrosis in the trial. Only 20% of the operators did the protocol.
Okay.
It's intention to treat.
Yeah.
So we have to report that this.
Yeah.
But what's important and unique, we presented this today, we were treating the fibrosis the same. The fibrosis in patient A, diabetics, is not the fibrosis in patient B, hypertension.
Okay.
It's not the fibrosis. What we learned, there's two kinds of fibrosis. One is we use the entropy equation by our AI statistician to come to us with this definition. We took 840 different AFib patients, all the trial patients, and look at their MRI scans, and we realized there's two different patterns of myopathy in this patient. You use the entropy, Shannon's entropy, to calculate this. Low entropy, where the distribution is everywhere, and high entropy when they're patchy.
Okay.
And as probably you remember this from your physics and times and your college, but low entropy uses a lot of energy. So the atrium uses a lot of energy to keep that fibrosis in place. And these patients did not do as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
So what this teaches us, if you have a patient with low entropy on MR or fibrosis, do PVI only. If not, do ablate the fibrosis, scattered, not aggregate, scattered.
Okay.
And this low entropy, you get 29% better outcome using that approach. So that's what we've been learning. Also, patients less than 59 years old or 60 years old, they do 30% better using fibrosis debulking. The older patients, they don't profit from fibrosis.
So it's much more complicated. It's not like a grace.
That's when we saw Scott the same. That was a mistake.
Yeah, I got you. So
that's what we learned from the trial. It's not a mistake.
Well, that's important, though.
That's why we do trial, you and me, to learn.
Yeah, no, I think that's important.
The GAS trial, right?
Unfortunately, learned a lot the wrong way. Yes.
Taught us. I say from my experience, this is my number 3rd and number 4th trial is ongoing. You always learn from trials. You don't do trials just to look at them. You learn, and you need to communicate the message and continue learning. And this trial taught us a lot.
So on that line, and I agree, there's more castles coming. Is that correct? Can you give us a little?
Yeah, as you know, Dr. Zones and Dr. Zomar did the castle with us. The transplant just published. Striking data, as you know. Thanks God, it's helping a lot of patients. And we started to convince our heart failure community. But now we're designing Castle 2, which is will be together with the heart failure community. We attracted them to be part of it. Caroline Lim will be my co-pilot on this trial. We're taking diastolic dysfunction patients, screening them first. We're taking 4,000 patients. We're going to screen them for AFib. And if we find AFib, which we expect 25% in the population, we define it. We're going to randomize them to ablation versus drugs.
Okay.
The ablation will be unified this time and using PFA to have objectivity, which you missed with radiofrequency.
Right. Well, will you just target the veins or will you target other things?
PVI only.
PVI only.
So far, all the data, every single randomized prospective trial.
I know. I just asked.
Ask me on this. I disagree with anything, although outside the vein ablation, until you show me one single trial, show me superiority, prospective, randomized, controlled, Eric, PVI is still king.
I won't argue with you on that. At your well-known yearly course, what was my hope to everyone was stop isolating veins only. There's more to it.
Yeah.
But you have to find out the more. I'm not saying just do things, right? Well, the field owes you a lot. You've done great work, and we look forward to your ongoing trials. And thanks once again for being on the show.
I can't finish this without saying thank you for your mentorship.
It's always a pleasure.
My friend.